They were spending 23, 24 hours in the cell, and if they were let out, it was a choice of phone call or shower.
You could see people's mental health really taking a dive. Somebody actually did commit suicide whilst I was in custody.
The question is, what has this year of the pandemic done to those people?
When the pandemic first struck, there were warnings that prisoners were at particular risk, with overcrowding, shared cells and shared facilities. To try and protect inmates and officers from the virus, the government introduced new regulations.
Prisons were put in highly restrictive regimes. Many are still in place. Prisoners have been locked up for 23 hours a day. There have been no education or employment opportunities and no visits allowed from family or loved ones. A new report given exclusively to Channel 4 News looks at the impact that this has had on the mental and physical health of the men and women inside. What do you think the effect of being locked up for that long has had on your son and other prisoners?
I think they lose hope. One of the things all of us have had to endure during this pandemic is the belief and hope it's going to change. And I'm not so sure that people in prison have that same hope.
Yasmin's son had almost reached the end of a long-term sentence for a drugs offence when the country went into lockdown. It's not her real name. She doesn't want to be identified because she's worried about the repercussions for her grandchildren. They haven't been allowed to visit their dad in over a year.
Do you understand that the authorities were trying to protect the prison population from COVID? That's why they introduced these harsh measures.
I think those harsh measures that were introduced, I think both prisoners and families could accept them. But at times when things had changed in the community, they hadn't replicated inside the prison. At the time that rapid testing came in, we still weren't able to visit. I recognise people will say tough, that's the way that it is, but actually children don't choose who the parents are.
Despite the extra restrictions, Yasmin's son caught COVID, as did 30% of the men on his wing. Across England and Wales in December, there were nearly 2,400 cases, an increase of 70% in 1 month. Numbers have since fallen. A new report by the Zahid Mubarek Trust has found that Black and Asian inmates who are overrepresented in the prison population have suffered disproportionately.
Lockdown restrictions both caused and aggravated mental health issues, with more than half of prison leavers reporting increased stress, anxiety or depression. The pandemic has also refocused attention on long-standing problems in the prison system, including under-resourcing, overcrowding and an unsafe environment both for staff and prisoners.
The charity also found that there have been profound effects on rehabilitation, which it says should concern us all.
So when I first heard about coronavirus, the feelings in there was just absolutely upside down. Everybody had 100 things going through their mind, nobody knew what to think. It's hard, especially when you're sharing rooms with people, you're all having to share the same bathrooms, the same showers, the same sinks.
Having served her time during the pandemic, Zainab was recently released. Again, it's not her real name. She says many of the young women she was locked up with struggled to cope with the anxiety, the isolation, the lack of family visits. One inmate eventually took her own life.
It was really sad. I think everything just got on top of her and she just had enough. Visits are what you really look forward to every week. It's what helps you get through your sentence. So when visits stopped, it really did make everybody's mental health go downhill.
Zainab is from an Asian background and says a sense of stigma and shame has made it hard to settle back into her community, especially because COVID restrictions mean she hasn't been given face-to-face support from the probation services.
I felt like when I came out, I was just kind of left to fend for myself. Like it was scary, I didn't have a clue what to do, so many things had changed. People end up homeless, they end up back in prison because of these situations.
The Ministry of Justice told us their decisive action meant COVID-related deaths in prisons were significantly lower than predicted, and that they're working to better understand the experiences of minority ethnic prisoners. Yasmin's son will soon be out, but she's concerned that he hasn't been prepared because all of his day release sessions were cancelled.
A lot of people will say to you that they don't have any sympathy. Your son committed a serious crime, he had to go to prison, there was a pandemic. What's the problem?
Well, the problem is there's very few prisoners who are never, ever, ever not going to come out. I don't like what my son did, I don't support it, but what I want him to do is to come out better than what he went in. And I'm not so sure that the last year of having no rehabilitation systems in place has done him any favours in terms of how he rejoins society.
The government says they continue to support prisoners' well-being and that the majority of rehabilitation programmes have been restarted. Darshna Soni, Channel 4 News.